Something really creepy happened to me last night. Hi guys, I'm Kimothy, I'm 30. Yesterday I spent the night somewhere different than usual. Bed was actually really comfortable, so I wasn't expecting anything weird. I couldn't fall asleep, so I stayed in on my phone until around 4 a.m. When I finally closed my eyes, about 5 minutes later, I felt something brush across my forehead. It felt like 1 or 2. There wasn't any wind. The AC wasn't even on. I turned my head, and a few seconds later, I felt it again. At that point, I started feeling a little scared, but I tried to ignore it. A few minutes later, I suddenly heard what sounded like a little kid talking near my right ear. Like this. I couldn't understand actually what they were saying, but I definitely sounded like a young child. The moment I heard it, my whole body froze. I honestly felt like sleep paralysis. I was trying so hard to move by cleansing my jaw and making fists with my hands. After a few seconds, I was finally able to move again. I couldn't fall back asleep about 10 minutes. The next morning, I told my husband what happened and he told me he had a really bad nightmare that night too. We don't usually experience things like that, so it felt really strange. When I woke up that morning, my whole upper back was unbelievable stiff. I slept in all kinds of places before, and I've never woken up feeling like that. My body felt so tight for some reason. I stretched it for about 30 minutes, and then when I stretched my neck like this, my neck suddenly locked it up. I couldn't even turn my head to the left. From the moment I woke up, I felt awful. I was nauseous. My whole body ached, and it honestly felt like I was coming down with the flu. As soon as I got home, I put on Korean pain relief patch, and I slept almost the entire day. I barely ate anything because I felt so sick. And now I finally feel normal again. My neck is so much better. But I still can't explain what happened last night. Maybe I was half asleep. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I honestly don't know. What do you think? Okay. Bye. Have a good night.
Grandma says that we're not allowed to go in the basement. Welcome back to Creepy Crochet and Creepy Pasta. Let's get into today's scary story. I wait until I can hear Grandma snoring, then I make my way to the basement. Whatever's down there has to be pretty neat, right? Gotta be pretty neat. Why else would she say not to go down there? The door to the basement is locked with a padlock, but Grandma keeps the key to it on a hook right next to the door. Like, come on. You're not gonna keep me out of the basement that way. Maybe she's just getting old and doesn't want to forget where the key is. I open the padlock and swing open the door. A puff of air hits me that smells old. Everything in this house smells old. Maybe that just happens when you're old. I take one step into the basement and the stair creaks like I stepped on a cat's tail. I freeze, grimace, and mouth the word, yikes. I stand still for a second, but I can still hear Grandma snoring upstairs. Are old people supposed to snore that loud? I hold my breath as I walk down the rest of the steps like a ninja. I'm quiet as a mouse, silent as the grave, until I step on a splinter and let out a tiny yelp. Hello? Is somebody there? I hear a voice. Only the problem is that it didn't come from upstairs. The voice is coming from the basement. Despite my better judgment, I respond with a hushed, hello? Oh, thank God. Please, you have to help me. Where are you? I ask in my loudest whisper. In the corner. Please hurry before she wakes up. In the corner of the basement, a blanket was draped over something, so I gave it a quick tug. Underneath was a cage, and inside was Grandpa, I say, much louder than I should have. Why are you in there? Grandma put me here. This isn't like an old person's sex thing, is it? I regretted asking the second the words came out. No, God, please. You have to get me out of here before she... The lights to the basement turn on, and suddenly Grandma's standing at the bottom of the stairs. I distinctly remember telling you that you're not allowed down here. Grandma's voice has a venom to it that makes my skin crawl. Grandma, I ask, trying not to let her see me shake. Why is Grandpa in a cage? Grandma walks over, grabs my shoulder, and gently backs me away from the cage. I was hoping we could have this discussion when you were older, but there's no point in putting it off now. Grandma takes a deep breath. That's not your grandfather. I look at the man in the cage and then look back at Grandma. Yes, it is, I say. My child, it only looks like your grandpa. But it most certainly is not. Don't listen to her, Grandpa calls from the cage. She's gone crazy. Shut your mouth, or I will shut it for you. I've never seen Grandma be mean before. But if that's not Grandpa, who is it? I ask. That's a very good question, my child. Grandma got down on one knee so she could speak to me directly. There are so many names for that thing. Doppelganger, shapeshifter. My mother always called them copycats. They take the shape of someone you love, wait until you're totally at peace, and then kill you too so they can add your shape to their collection. I look at the man in the cage and then look back at Grandma, very confused. He looks like Grandpa to me. You sure it's not Grandpa? I'm very sure. But how can you know? Because I buried your grandfather under the willow in the back of our yard. She's lying, Grandpa yells. Remember when I got you a red tricycle for your 4th birthday? It's me. She's gone senile. I point at Grandpa and look at Grandma expectantly. She only sighs. When a copycat becomes you, they get all your memories as well. Even now he's trying to trick you, to manipulate you, so you'll let him out and he can kill us both. But why, I ask, and then add, I mean, why copy Grandpa? Because Grandma has a lot of money saved up. Most old people do, and so that's who copycats like to become the most. They can live in luxury until all the money is spent. Plus, nobody bats an eye when an old person dies. That's what old people do. Then they can fake their death and just move on to their next victim. But we're not going to let that happen. Or not? I ask. No, because you're going to kill it. Grandma walks to a closet at the end of the basement and pulls out a mop with a butcher knife furiously duct taped to the end. Grandma, I mutter. This is your punishment for coming down into the basement. Don't think I've forgotten that you deliberately disobeyed me. Take it. Grandma thrusts the makeshift spear into my hands. I stop myself from whimpering and hold the spear tight. How do I do it so there's no pain? I ask. Oh, child, just jab him until he stops moving. It'll be over soon. You mean like this? I stab the spear right into Grandma's throat. There's horror in her eyes as she collapses to the floor. She tries to speak, to say something, but only gasping bubbles of blood come out. The light has barely left her eyes before Grandpa cheers. I knew you'd save me. Now let me out of here. No, I don't think I will. I walk over to Grandma and place a hand on her forehead. I copy her, slowly shifting my skin and growing, until I look just like her. You had your chance, and you mucked it up. I laugh. Now I get to be her.
It's 2:30 a.m. and you think that you're seeing your little girl in your room, when in fact, it's not. Tonight's ghost story is called The Little Girl on the Landing, and this links to the picture and the video that we saw from Lauren yesterday, and this explains what's going on in her house. Now, Lauren says, in 2019, we moved into a house that was built in the 80s, so not like a classic haunted house. She says, at first, we didn't feel like anything was off, until after lockdown, when we were all cleared to go back to work. At the time, my husband worked away in Scotland from Monday to Friday, and he used to leave home at around 2:30 a.m. on the Monday to start his long drive. Now, she says, at the time, my youngest daughter, Orla, was only 5, and my eldest daughter, Lacey, was 12. I am a very spiritual person and I've had my fair share of wild experiences. My husband, not so much. He doesn't believe at all. Lauren says it started with a few noises, bangs, and things moving that we couldn't explain. We lived in a detached house. On Monday morning at 2:30 a.m, my husband woke me up to say goodbye and give me a kiss before heading off to Scotland. He had been gone for around 10 to 15 minutes. All of the lights were off, the kids were asleep, and I lay there having a scroll through my phone when, out of the corner of my eye, in the bedroom doorway, I saw what I thought was Orla. Now, in the darkness, she thinks she makes out a little girl with a white nightdress, pigtail plaits, and she says, I looked up and said, Orla, are you okay? Do you want to come and get in bed with me? There was no answer from this child. She just stood there. I said the same thing and still nothing. She just looked at me. As I became a little uneasy, I raised my voice a little and said, Orla, what are you doing? Come in here. And rightly so, because kids are terrifying anyway. Then Lauren says she hears Orla shout from her bedroom on the opposite side of the house, Mummy, what? Lauren says I went cold, shaking and wanted to be sick. She says that little girl was so incredibly vivid that I thought it was Orla, but it wasn't. Before my eyes, she slowly turned and started to disappear. She said I called my husband Gary, but of course he didn't believe me. Now, we're going to have an incident with Gary in the next story where he may start to believe these stories just a little bit of what happens to him. Make sure you follow for that. It's coming tomorrow. And if you have a ghost story, email me, thedarklingchronicles25@gmail.com. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Y'all, I wasn't even planning on telling y'all about these dolls today. But after I posted these dolls, it was one comment that wanted to know the story behind them. Well, here it is. And hey toxins, welcome back to my page where I don't spill tea, I brew coffee. And not everything that I serve is gonna be safe. Now, I've had these two Raggedy Ann dolls for over 30 years. And I also have Andy as well. And a little spooky one that rocks by itself without anybody rocking it and the music come on. And a little rocking chair for over 3 decades. They're not collectibles, and I didn't buy them because I thought they was cute. These dolls right here were given to me by my great grandmother, Ella. And when I was 9 years old, this is what she gave me. And the story behind these two started 2 years before that, when I was 7 years old. I had another Raggedy Ann doll that went everywhere with me. I slept with that doll. I watched TV with it. I ate with it. I took it all over the house, and it was literally my favorite toy. Then one day, it just disappeared. It wasn't misplaced. It wasn't donated, not thrown away. It was just gone, just vanished. Poof. Everybody searched for that doll because I would cry my eyes out. My family looked everywhere, under the beds, in the closet, the attics, boxes, everywhere. And nobody ever found it to this day. None of us knew what happened to that doll. And about 2 years later, my great-grandmother came to see me. And she handed me 2 dolls. These 2 right here, these babies. They wasn't wrapped in paper. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't a holiday. She just handed them to me. And she looked me in my eyes and she said, keep these close. Then she said something that I still remember. And I think it's going to stay with me my entire life. She said, one day, you will understand why. And that was it. It was no explanation, no story, no reason, just to keep them close. And I've been doing exactly that, y'all. So when you're 9 years old, you don't think much about it. You just listen. So guess what? I did. And these dolls have been with me through every move, every apartment, every house, all across the country. Every chapter of my life, these babies are there. I don't go anywhere without them. Every time I pack up my life, they get packed up too. And they've been sitting beside me for over 3 decades. But here's where things started getting strange with my babies here. There have been times that I will walk into the room and one of the dolls will be sitting somewhere I don't even remember leaving it. Like on a chair, on the couch, leaning against a wall. And the first thing I would do every single time is call my kids in there and be like, who moved my dolls? Every single time, they'll tell me the same exact thing. It wasn't us. And honestly, I believe them because my kids never liked these 2 dolls here. Now, when they were little, not when they got older, they wouldn't even play with them. They didn't even want these 2 in their room. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. They were genuinely afraid of them. I remember them screaming and crying if I tried to give them this doll. And it wasn't just my kids. I've had people come to my house and look at these dolls and immediately say, I don't like those. But before they even knew the story about my babies. Now, before I said a single word, them just seeing these dolls made them uncomfortable. People were always uncomfortable around them. And one day, a friend of mine, she came over. She was very spiritual, just like me. And I never mentioned my dolls. Never told her where they came from. But she looked at them when she was in my bedroom, and she got really, really quiet. And she asked me, where did you get those? And I told her, my great-grandmother gave them to me. She kept staring at them, and then she looked at me, and she said, I don't know their history, but those dolls make me nauseous. She believes that these 2 here were cursed. I can't tell you if she was right or not, and I can't tell you she was wrong. All I know is she had the same exact reaction that so many other people had without even knowing the story about them. So after all of these years, I still think about what my great-grandmother meant. Why did she replace the doll that disappeared? Why did she tell me to keep these 2 close? And what did she know that I didn't know? Maybe it was nothing more than just family story, or maybe it was her way of making me feel protected, or maybe she understood something that she never got the chance to explain because she also passed away a few months later. I honestly don't know, but one thing I do know is after more than 30 years, these dolls are still with me, even when everybody else have passed. Even my house fire, these dolls did not get burned. And also, I love them. Now tell me, if your great-grandmother handed you something, looked you in your eyes, and said to you to keep these close, one day you'll understand. Would you have listened to her? Tell you about another experience that I had involving these dolls and my porcelain dolls that still makes me stop and think every time I think about it? Then let me know. And don't forget, drink from a clean source and lock your gate. That's the 2026 mindset. I love y'all, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
He saw his grandpa's corpse walking at night. This is one of the craziest stories you're about to hear, so if you're alone right now, do not listen to this story at night. A man from Mexico shared a story that still terrifies him decades later. He claimed that he was just 6 years old when his grandfather sadly passed away. Now, the family held the velorio at home, and like everyone gathered, everyone prayed. I think they prayed for a few days while they were there. He remembers the coffin sitting in the living room surrounded by candles, flowers, pictures. It was something very nice, but to someone that's very young, it may seem a bit scary. After a long night of praying and having dinner, everyone went home. But where he was staying at was actually like his grandpa's home, but he was just staying with his aunts and his parents in that home. He remembers waking up very sweaty. It was a very hot night and he needed to go to the bathroom really bad. So he tried waking up his brother, but his brother just wouldn't wake up. So he was holding it for a really long time. Because it was very dark, he was very scared. So he had to man up and go downstairs to the living room to go to the bathroom. Because if you know the Mexican homes, they barely have bathrooms. Now, this is where things take a dark turn. He claims that after using the bathroom, he was washing his hands and he heard footsteps in the living room, but he thought it was a sibling. Now, being 6 years old in the complete darkness downstairs is something to give you nightmare fuel, but he said that he cracked open the door to the bathroom and he swears that right there standing next to the coffin was his grandpa's corpse. He was wearing the same thing he was wearing in the coffin, but his eyes were very wide. He was just standing there. He then claimed that the grandpa or whatever, he sighed very loudly and walked the other way. And I mean, him, the child in the story, he ran super fast upstairs crying and screaming to his parents. After telling them what happened, no one believed him. Everyone laughed at him. They came downstairs to check on the grandpa. The grandpa was still in the coffin. Until this day, decades later, no one believes him, and he still is very terrified by this incident. But he swears that what he saw was real.
When Kim buys her daughter an old doll at a garage sale, she has no idea that something so horrifying is going to happen that they will barely make it out alive. So Kim has a daughter called Natalie. Natalie's only 5 years old. So one day when Kim goes get Natalie at school, on the way back, there's this garage sale on the side of the street, only 2 blocks away from Kim's house. So it's this really old but really big house, and they're having this estate sale, which usually happens when someone passes away and they're just trying to sell the belongings that used to belong to this person that used to live in the house. So Kim wants to look around and see. She's a little curious to see if she can find anything interesting. But Natalie sees something in the garage sale that she really, really likes. She sees a collection of dolls, and there is one doll that stands out to Natalie, and Natalie really, really wants this doll. So her mom doesn't really know, the doll is she's a little weirded out. The doll's a little creepy, but it's only $5. So Kim decides to just buy Natalie the doll because she wanted it so much. So they go home and Natalie is completely in love with this doll. She's just playing with this doll all the time and talking to this doll, just like a normal 5-year-old would. But Kim notices some things a little bit weird, a little bit off. Natalie starts talking so much with this doll, and during the night she's talking, and Kim just thinks that she was having maybe dreams and nightmares and maybe talking to imaginary friends just like kids do. But on the next day, Kim notices that Natalie doesn't look so well. Natalie looks a little bit pale, a little bit of dark circle around her eyes. So Kim is a little worried that Natalie might be sick, but she checks her temperature and she seems fine. So Kim is just doing things around the house, and then she goes outside to get the mail at the mailbox, and she sees a neighbor walking by, Susan. So Susan is going for a walk, and she just stops to say hi to Kim. And, they just kind of start doing a little small talk. And Susan touches on the subject of the lady that passed away and the lady that, they made the garage sale about. So Kim is like, oh yeah, I went to the estate sale and Natalie really fell in love with one of her dolls. So I had to get one of her dolls for Natalie. So Susan is like, oh, so you bought one of the dolls from Mrs. Jones. So Mrs. Jones was the old lady that passed away. And Kim is like, yeah, Natalie really wanted one of her dolls, so I ended up buying it for her. And Susan gets a little weird when she says that, but Susan is like, so how is your daughter doing, by the way? And Kim is like, you know what, for the last couple of days, actually, she's been a little sick. I'm afraid that she has the flu or something, but I'm not sure what's wrong with her. Checked her temperature, she's fine. And Susan was like, okay, when did you buy the doll? And Kim is like not understanding the correlation, but she's like, yeah, a couple days ago. And Susan is like, okay, well, she's like, you know what, Kim, I have to tell you something that's gonna sound really crazy, and you can do whatever you want with this information, but since you bought one of Mrs. Jones' doll, I think you should know. So Susan go on to tell Kim about Mrs. Jones and this crazy story that has happened long time ago. So Mrs. Jones and her husband were like this really wealthy couple, but long time ago when they started out in their businesses, they had like this business partners, and actually their business partners, they were like part of an occult. And this cult, they kind of like made a deal with this cult that they would become really wealthy, they would get all the money, all the wealth that they wanted, but they would have to sacrifice one of their babies, one of their newborns, to this cult as payment for all of their wealth. But Mrs. Jones just happens to be like sort of like a witch of some kind, and she knew black magic. So what Mrs. Jones tried to do, because she did not want to give one of her babies to this cult, but they had no choice. So she made a ritual before giving away her newborn. She made this ritual where she passed the spirits from her baby into one of her dolls, one of the dolls from her collection. And actually throughout her whole life, she treated this doll as one of her children. So Kim is very shocked when she hears this story, and she goes back inside, and the first thing she does is to go look at this doll. So she stares at this doll. The doll's not doing anything. So Kim has this idea of putting a camera overnight in Natalie's room to see her interaction with the doll and just to see if the doll is doing anything. So later that night, Kim is just watching through the camera, and Natalie is alone with the doll in her room, and she's going to bed. She's supposed to be going to sleep, and all of a sudden she starts talking to the doll. So Kim has her eyes glued on the screen, and she's like trying to see if the doll is doing anything. She cannot see anything through the camera, and then she hears something with her own ear, not through the camera, that kind of like gives her a chill on her spine. So she hears another voice talking to Natalie, and she thinks that she's going crazy because she's looking at the camera and trying to hear through the camera, and she's not seeing anything, but she's hearing with her own ears. So she runs to Natalie's room, but she doesn't let Natalie see that she's going. So she just opens a little crack on the door and just peeks to see what is going on in there. And Natalie is talking to the doll, and Kim sees something that makes her stomach drop. So she sees the doll actually moving and talking to Natalie like a child would, and she cannot believe her eyes. So Kim immediately just gets inside the room, and she's like, Natalie, what is going on here? And the doll immediately just goes and just freezes, doesn't move, doesn't do anything. So Kim runs back down to where the camera is, and actually she wakes up her husband. She's like, hey, I need to show you something. And she's like, this doll was just talking to our daughter, and she was moving and she was talking. And her husband is like, wait, what are you talking about? Because her husband didn't even know about any of this. So she's like, I can prove, I can show you through the camera. So when she shows the camera to her husband, actually, there is nothing on the camera. There's nothing. Kim only got to see the doll talk and move with her own eyes, but the camera did not pick up anything. The doll was completely still on the camera. And Kim just cannot believe what she sees. So she is like, no, I need to do something. Like, I need to get rid of this doll right now. So she takes this doll, take it outside, and burn the doll completely. Once they all go to sleep that night, even though Natalie was really upset about this, something horrifying happens. A fire catches in their kitchen and actually burns their house to the ground. But they all get out of their house. And as Kim is watching their house burn to the ground, she really wonders if this was all a big coincidence or if her daughter got this close from being possessed by this doll and they got really close to die on this fire.
My toxic trait is believing that I could have escaped Alcatraz and survived the entire swim back. Apologies in advance for coming on the internet and sounding stupid, but I genuinely thought that Alcatraz looked more like Azkaban. When I was told the story about how the prisoners had escaped Alcatraz, the result of that case has always been very divided. Did they make it? Did they not make it? And I've always been on the side of no, of course they didn't make it, because who is surviving this? But now that I'm more aware of the surroundings and I've done a little bit more deep diving, I think they made it. So the people that escaped was John and Clarence England and Franklin Morris. A guy by the name of Alan West was also supposed to escape with them, but he ends up ultimately getting left behind. But our guy Frank was born September 1st of 1926. He was considered to be extremely intelligent with a very high IQ, like considered to be in the top 2% of the population. But yet, since he was a teen, he was always in and out of prison. His criminal record consisted of bank robbery, burglary, drug possession. In the middle of a 10-year sentence to Louisiana State Penitentiary, he broke out, which is ultimately what got him sent to Alcatraz. But the funny thing is that the staff at Alcatraz actually considered him to be like a model inmate, but quietly all along he was just planning his escape. And he's ultimately considered to be the mastermind behind all of this. And he meets brothers John and Clarence England, who are both in Alcatraz together. John was born 1930, Clarence 1931. He grew up in a large family that was considered to be poor. They were involved in a non-violent bank robbery and then were sent to Alcatraz after multiple attempts of escaping several different prisons that they were locked up in. I also want to preface and say that these two brothers were considered to be strong swimmers. Like, they would swim in the cold Michigan lakes, like even through ice. And most of their contribution to the escape was actually constructing the escape tools. And then there was poor Alan, who was put in prison for car theft and tried to escape Florida State Prison, so booted to Alcatraz. For all the stories that I do need to stop assuming, because for whatever reason, I did think that the people in Alcatraz were in there because they did something like horrible. Robbery and car theft, I know that they tried to escape, but like, that's not what I thought the place was for. But they built this place thinking that it was going to be absolutely unescapable. The water surrounding Alcatraz is considered to be frigid, especially at night. Rough, unpredictable currents, whirlpools, tide changes could all ultimately end up deadly. The prison also had constant surveillance, 12 guard towers, 24/7, armed guards. Even if you got out of your thick concrete cell, you had to go through multiple barriers, climb walls, get past watchmen. But how these guys ended up breaking through seems so utterly insane to me that to this day, I don't even know how this worked. I see why documentaries have been made off of this. I see how it's so impressive. I think that the reason that it did ultimately work is because they were playing the long game. For over 2 years, these 4 men were digging the vents. Behind everyone's cell is an air vent barely big enough for someone's head to even fit through, using spoons, scrap metals, and a homemade drill made from a vacuum cleaner motor, which I don't even understand. They were able to chisel the concrete out night after night after night. Probably thinking, how did they hide something like this? Well, they used a cardboard that kind of matched the wall in order to cover that section. And if you're anything like me, you're also probably thinking, well, this probably had to have made a lot of noise, right? Well, the inmates were given a music hour, so they would use the sound of an accordion to muffle them trying to escape. So after the 2 years were up and they were actually physically able to fit through these holes that they had dug up, next step was to ultimately create a distraction, which they needed to convince the guards that they were still in their bed even when they weren't. They did this through crafting a lifelike dummy head. Using things like soap, toilet paper, and glue, they essentially paper mached a head. They used paint from the art supplies room and real hair from the barbershop. So whenever the guards would walk by and check, they would just assume that they were sleeping. So once the vents were completely ready, they crawled through the wall into an unsecured utility corridor, climbed up to the ventilation shaft on the roof using drain pipes, went to the recreation yard on the roof, and then went back down the drain pipe. Eventually reached the northern shoreline, which I guess was just out of the view of the guards. And for their raft, they used over 50 stolen raincoats
and cement, which somehow created a 13-foot long raft. And life preservers secretly glued all this together in a workshop area above the cell block, launched sometime around 10 p.m. June 11th, 1962. I guess during this time the tides were heading outside the bay. It wasn't until the next morning, June 12th, whenever the guards woke up, they walked in, they saw the dummies, and they were like, oh, where are they? They found poor Alan stuck in a vent hole. An intensive manhunt then began. They called everyone. There was helicopters, there was boats, there was FBI agents, and ultimately the only thing that they came back with was some personal belongings along the bay, homemade paddle, and one of the life vests. No bodies were ever recovered. FBI ultimately closed the case in 1979, and they just strongly believe that no one could have survived that swim without leaving more evidence. If you're like me now, I honestly think that the FBI just wanted to protect its reputation at that point because, like, how embarrassing. Unescapable prison was just escaped via paper mache and some arts and crafts. They definitely wanted people to think that Alcatraz was unescapable. Also, weird tidbit, but the case was actually reopened in 2018 by the US Marshals, saying that if the guys were still alive, they would be in their 90s. But there are 4 things that happened afterwards that truly stumped me and really make me think that they did survive. One is that the family of John and Clarence actually started to receive signed letters from them years after they were pronounced dead, and would come in with roses for their grandmother. And allegedly this would be exactly in their handwriting. Then a photo surfaced in 1993 that was taken in 1975 of the 2 brothers, allegedly taken by a family friend in Brazil. They were standing next to this farm truck. Facial recognition experts actually went in and said that this has a very high probability of being them. US Marshals ended up visiting Brazil multiple times after seeing this image, but never came out with anything. And in 2013, there was a letter sent to the San Francisco Police Department. It was allegedly from John, basically stating things like, yes, we all made it that night, but barely, and stating that he was 83 years old and that he was dying of cancer. He offered to turn himself in if he was given minimal sentence time and medical care. He also stated that John Morris had passed away in 2008, and that his brother passed away in 2011. The police department actually kept this letter hidden for 5 years. Whenever they sampled the handwriting of all the guys, they just kind of deemed the letter inconclusive, which I feel like as you get older, your handwriting changes. The 4th thing was that there was actually a guy in prison by the name of Robert who was actually released before them, and he just strongly believed that these guys did not deserve to die in prison. So his job was to be lookout, and once they got to shore, he actually was able to take them to a safe place and transport them wherever. Although I don't know this guy's last name and backstory or anything, this was just mentioned on the History Channel documentary. The confession was considered credible enough that the US Marshals investigated further, but in 2015 he admitted to all this on his deathbed and said that the men have just been living quiet lives in South Africa. Also, I just learned that triathletes like do this swim all the time. Granted, they don't have people on watch trying to pew them, and this isn't happening like in the dead of night. Like, I'm sorry, look how happy some of these people are swimming this. Look at this person just diving, right? Like, are you kidding? Honestly, now that I've seen those photos, I will die on the hill that they survived.
Check this out, y'all. Now you got Aaron. And Aaron, one of those kids that had very young parents. His parents had him at like 15. And Aaron seen a lot of wild stuff in his younger years. Now, his father was taken away by the streets of Chicago. Aaron was only like 7 years old. After that, Aaron's mother started to get her stuff together. You know, she wasn't blowing a tree, no drinking, none of that stuff like that, nothing negative. And she started to work and save money because after that happened to Aaron's father, she wanted to get Aaron away from this environment. So finally, she got enough money, she moved them out to Blue Island. Now, around this time, Aaron is now like 13. And he is running away from home. He studied going back over there. He grew up on 88th and Blackstone. And, you know, right there by Stony, and all his friends around there. He went to school, his father's family. He's hanging out with his father's family. And they're not the best crowd. They're not the best crowd. So her son is getting into things because, you know, of his environment. But she really took him out of that environment, but he stayed going back. So one day she had to come pick him up from the police station because, you know, he was out doing school hours. He's supposed to be at school. He's all the way in the city of Chicago on Stony Island, caught, you know, by CPD. She went to talk to the father's family members to let them know, like, hey, I don't want him doing this, and y'all shouldn't want him doing this either, seeing as how, you know, his father left here. And, you know, some of the elders in the father family agreed with her. But, you know, those kids, the young ones, the YNs, they gonna do what they want. So one day she at work. She get a phone call telling her she need to come to the police station. Now, mind you, she had just picked him up a week prior. So the scenario was Aaron and a couple of his friends, decided they wanted to take a car. And, they were up on Stony Island at the Pizza Hut. They seen the elderly lady getting out of a clean Audi truck. And they wanted the Audi truck, so they went over there and they tried to take the lady keys, and she wouldn't let the keys go. So Aaron started to strike the lady several times, and she fell on the ground. And she looked at him. She said, young man, you so young. Don't you want to live and enjoy your life, the rest of your life? Life is so short. Even if we only live to 75, it's still not a long time. She like, you want to do this? He struck her again and say, let the keys go, lady. So she let the keys go because she didn't want to get hit again. So after that, they hopped in the car. Now they riding around, CPD got on them. Of course, they see that these are children driving someone's car, so they chasing them. Of course, these 13, 14-year-olds, they can't control this truck. They ran out of control. They had a car accident. Of course, the police all took them. There's really nothing they can really do to them, send them to juvenile, they're kids. So the mother had to go to the station. He was definitely sent to juvenile. But he was released like a week later after going to court, and he had a monitor on his leg. Now, the lady that they did this to, she suffered like a lot of head trauma, and this lady had went into a coma. Now, Aaron's mother is furious. She didn't want her son doing none of this stuff. She didn't want him getting in trouble, being in the streets of Chicago, but now she knows this is serious. See, he's just a kid. He don't know that if this lady, take a turn for the worse, you're gonna have something really bad on your record. And she don't want that for her son. So the mother had been going up there, visiting the lady, and she would take Aaron up there too. She would take Aaron up there too to see the lady. But Aaron would act so mean and distant, towards the lady. And the mother would go off on him like, Aaron, like, why you acting like that? Like, y'all did this to this woman, and you need to show her some respect. You need to apologize. You need to pray that, you get forgiveness for this, for what you done to this lady. Aaron, a young adolescent, rebellious, I ain't trying to hear that, whatever. He ain't really trying to hear what his mother talking about. So the old lady started waking up, and she woke up to them in the room, and she asked, like, who are y'all? And Aaron's mother explained who she was. And my son and his friends are the ones that did this to you. They the reason you here. And she looked over at Aaron. She said, yeah, I remember this young man. He the one that kept striking me. And his friends were standing back looking in amazement that he was striking me like he was. She said, young man, do you know what you done to me? It hurt me really, really bad. Aaron felt guilty, but, he tried to play that tough role. He looked at it and he just looked back down at the floor and started shaking his head. She said, y'all kids out here don't know how valuable life is. She say, I'm old. I have to move slow. And what y'all did to me, she said, I'm probably going to even be even worse than I was. Like before y'all even did that to me. She said, I'm 72 years old. She said, do you have a grandmother? And Aaron said, yes. She said, would you want somebody to do this to your grandmother? He said, my grandmother wouldn't be out sleeping. So the mother was like, Aaron, like, why would you say that? That lady told Aaron, she said, don't worry about it. She said, don't worry about it. You're going to be taught a lesson. Aaron, like, what lesson you going to teach me? Ain't nobody going to do nothing to me. They can't even lock me up for this. She said, don't worry about it. And, Aaron's mother started crying, and she started apologizing to the lady because she said, I'm so sorry. She said, I've been trying with him. I've been trying to get him together. She said, that's okay. She said, he gonna learn. He definitely gonna learn. And, Aaron's mother walked out, and she took him down to the car, and she was yelling at him. She was telling him how disrespectful he was, and like how you gonna get mad at this lady, and y'all assaulted her and tried to take something that belonged to her. And besides that, like, what's wrong with you? What's gotten into you? Like, why are you acting like this? You acting out, you got a good home, you got video games. Like, what's wrong with you, Aaron? But he didn't want to hear that. He just went in his pocket, flipped out his AirPods and threw him in his ear, and put his phone on YouTube, started listening to music. And his mother was just staring at him, tears rolling down, because she couldn't understand what was wrong with her son, why her son was acting like this, seeing as how he came from a good home. And he know the story of how his father left here, and it seemed like that's what he want for himself.
Follow, comment, share, subscribe for more stories. So Aaron's mother decided that she was going to make him pay some type of way for what he did to this lady. So she went up to the hospital and she had decided that she was going to tell the lady that, like, look, my son can cut your grass, wash your car forever, how long you want. He going to come to your house, take out garbage. He going to do all of this to help you out. So the lady said, you know what? That'd be good. I need a little helper around the house because I have nobody. I don't have no children. It's really just me. I don't have anybody. So the mother said, okay, so on the way to the lady house, she's telling Aaron, like, look, this elderly woman don't have nobody to help her. She don't have nobody to look out for her, run her errands, cut her grass. She said, go over here, help this lady for as long as you need it. So he like, how long I got to go over here? She like, every day if you have to. For the next 5 years, that lady needs you, because you wouldn't have to do this if y'all would have never did that to that lady. So of course he had an attitude. So they get there, Aaron cutting the grass, doing all that, the mother sitting on the porch talking to the old lady. And, he doing the chores or whatever she said do. Now, when he was done, it took him about a couple hours. He was tired. He was so tired to the point where he didn't even want to go outside and like kick it or nothing like that, because he was too tired from all the work he had just done. So the next day, he go over there. The lady had him, gave him a list, and sent him to the grocery store to get her a few items, so he doing that. So he going over there every day. He getting tired of it, he getting bored, his birthday coming up. He finna turn 14. So his mother had told him, like, he wasn't getting nothing for his birthday. Like, this was his punishment for what he did to that elderly woman, him and his friends. So what she decided to do was, on his birthday, she told him, like, you don't have to go over to the lady house to do no work on your birthday. But I'm not buying you nothing, and you not celebrating. You're not going outside. But that's the only thing I'm not going to do. You ain't got to go do the chores on your birthday. So he was ticked off about that. So the day before his birthday, he go over to the lady house. Now today she got to work in the inside of the house. So he in that joint dusting, sweeping, mopping floors. So the lady had like a tray of her medicine, a pill bottle sitting there, medicine that she had to take daily and her vitamins and stuff like that. She asked Aaron, she said, Aaron, will you take this tray and go and sit it up in my room on my dresser? So he grabbed it, he take it up there. But when he set the tray down on the dresser, he looked over. The woman had a jewelry box. And in the jewelry box, he popped it open, man. It was a little knot of money right there. She had some older lady jewelry, pearls, some diamond rings, but this stuff is valuable. This dude takes the stuff. He takes the money, takes the jewelry, everything. He take it, he looking around the room, he grab a pillowcase. He pour everything in the pillowcase. He ball the pillowcase up. He put it up under his shirt. He come down the stairs, he peek. He hurry up, like slide outside, and he go hide it under the lady porch for when he leave. So he go back in there. So the lady still being nice, they talking. He's steady doing stuff for her. So he say, I'm all done. It's time for me to go now. She say, okay, call your mother. I know it's your birthday tomorrow, and your mother say that you probably not gonna come tomorrow, but here, come here. So he went in there. The lady reached over in her purse, and she gave this guy $100. And he said, this for me? She like, yeah, it's your birthday. I know your mother said you can't celebrate and she was punishing you, but you deserve a little something. Plus, you've been over here doing all this good work for me. I want to thank you. So he took it and he walked off. And the first thing he said in the back of his mind, sucker, got you twice. So, he go get in the car with his mama. So about 2 hours later, the old lady had called the mother and she was crying and she was saying that, somebody had taken all her jewelry out of her box. She was just looking at her jewelry and she was taking her earrings out and to put them in a jewelry box and it's all gone. And she said it was some money in there that she was saving for something. And She was crying. She was hysterical. And the mother, set the phone down and say, Aaron, did you go take something out of that lady's house? He like, no, mama, I ain't took nothing. So the lady saying on the other end of the phone, she say, Miss, please. She said, I promise you I wouldn't lie about nothing like that. She said, ain't nobody been in my house. Nobody come here. It's only me here. And all my stuff is gone out of my jewelry box. Aaron like, yeah, it wasn't me. He smiling. He thinking it's a joke. So the lady, she's crying even more. She like, you know what? Don't even worry about it. And she hung up the phone. Right? So the whole day go by. You know what I'm saying? Night turn to day. Now it's the morning time. Aaron get up. He happy. He walk in there. He tell his mama, he say, Mama, it's my birthday. And I love you, mama. I'm sorry for all the stuff I've been putting you through, ma. Like, I promise you I'm sorry. I'm going to do right. I'm finna go my butt to school. I'm finna do everything I'm supposed to do. I'm finna be a new child. So his mother looking at him real funny, like, I don't know what done got into you on your birthday. Maybe 14, I turned you over a new leaf. So meanwhile, the old lady waking up, she getting up, everything hurt. Everything hurt. Everything hurt. So she getting up, like, why am I moving like this? Why do my breathing feel heavy? Like, what is this? She get up and she sat on the side of the bed and she raised up and she looked down and jumped like, why is my feet look? And started looking like, why am I in a gown? And she got up and she ran to the dressing and she looked in the mirror. He say, what the hell? He looking around the entire time. After Aaron stole that stuff from that old lady, see, that old lady never had nobody, no children or family around because it was something really special about her because she wasn't human. She wasn't human. She could do a lot of things, and she can also do something called soul swapping. So when Aaron got up that morning talking about some, hi, mommy, and I'm going to be the best child, that was not Aaron. That was the old lady. She soul swapped him. He wanted to do all that and make her life miserable and be a bad child and do all this. So she soul swapped him, swapped bodies with him. She was going to live out the rest of his years, and he didn't have long to live because the lady had cancer and she knew it and she didn't have long. So what she did was, since he didn't appreciate life and appreciate the good life his mother was giving him, she stole the rest of his years and she gonna live him out, and that's what happened for being ungrateful. Comment, share, subscribe for more stories.
This family started to believe their dog was a skinwalker, so they began to investigate. At first, it was just small things. Then she started walking on two legs like a human. Even one of their neighbors filmed her standing upright by the fence, staring directly at another dog. And that other dog was so terrified, it immediately ran away. But after that, things only became more disturbing. One day, the family found her sitting on the stairs in a perfectly human-like position. But the moment they got closer, she suddenly started acting like a completely normal dog again. So they decided to test her, and that's when things became truly insane. They placed her inside a circle of salt. According to an old legend, a skinwalker cannot cross salt without revealing its true form. The scariest part? She didn't move at all. But she simply stayed in the middle of the circle, staring at them with a cold, intelligent look. A look no normal animal should ever have. And then they asked the question no one should ever ask. Are you a skinwalker? The dog did not react. She just stared at them, completely motionless, as if she understood that this alone was already enough. Too scared to keep her in the house any longer, they drove far into the woods, where they decided to leave her behind. But what happened the moment they opened the car door in the middle of the woods still haunts them to this day. Search Skinwalker Dog if you want to see the rest of the footage.
If you grew up in the early internet days, you probably remember receiving chainmail. Those creepy emails claiming that if you didn't forward them to however many friends, then you'd become the next victim of whatever horrifying story they contained. But did you know that chainmail existed long before the internet ever came to be? The earliest known chain letters appeared in the late 1800s, but they weren't meant to scare people. They were instead usually religious in nature. A popular one from this time period was known as the Letter from Heaven. The storyline behind this so-called Letter from Heaven was that it was written by Jesus himself and had miraculously fallen from the sky. Allegedly. Those receiving the letter were instructed to copy it by hand and send it to others, because if they did, they were promised blessings in return. However, if they ignored it misfortune was said to follow. By the early 1900s, chain letters had evolved, and during the Great Depression, prosperity chain letters became the new thing. These letters promised money instead of miracles, and participants were instructed to mail a small amount of cash to the name at the top of the list, then remove that name, add their own to the bottom, make several copies, and mail the letters to friends and family. If everyone followed instructions, the letter claimed money would eventually come pouring in, but it never did. This is also an early example of a pyramid scheme. So by the 70s and 80s, scary chain letters became more popular, warning people that if they broke the chain and refused to pass it on, they would suffer some sort of tragedy in the following days, similar to the plot of the movie The Ring. And then came the internet, and all of a sudden, chainmail was spreading like wildfire, using urban legends to scare people into passing the message along. And if they didn't heed the warning written out to them, they might end up like Carmen Winstead.
I saw a dark shadow slip out my window. Hey guys, and welcome back to another creepy story. If you want to send me a story, you can send it to me through message or you can comment it down below. Good evening. I want to share something that happened recently in the place where I live. I live in a private complex with my husband and our small children. A few nights ago, about 4 nights ago, my husband was called to work the night shift, so I stayed home alone with the kids. Our bedroom window looks over to the garden, and at around 4:28 a.m., I heard the door to my room slowly open. Okay, sorry about that, but my phone literally fell to the ground even though it's on a phone stand. I heard the door to my room slowly open. The only light in the room came from the TV, and I suddenly saw a dark shadow slip out the window. Almost immediately, the neighborhood dogs began to howl, and a shiver ran through me. Literally, it made me cry. When my husband returned the next day, I told him what had happened, and we didn't talk about it any further. But yesterday, when he went out again, he told me there was a ceremony going on nearby in our community. They say a young man had died in a motorcycle accident. I can't help but wonder if the shadow I saw was related or just a strange coincidence. So I shook it off, but then they posted all of his ceremony details on Facebook, and when I saw it, I noticed it was the same day that I saw the shadow.
So 3 nights ago, I woke up at exactly 3:13 a.m. Not to a yell, not to a banging, not to little pitter patters on the floor, but to a faint whisper calling my name, Emily. So I sat up and I looked around, but I didn't see anything that would have made any kind of sound that would sound like that. So I turned back over, laid down, and the second my head hit the pillow, I heard it again, Emily. But this time it sounded like it was coming from the hallway. So I got up, I went to investigate. I seen nothing, no shadows, nothing. And then again it goes, Emily. But then this time I actually kind of recognized the sound of the voice. And you're going to call me crazy, but it sounded like my mom. But the problem is, my mom's been dead for 6 years. 5 minutes later, I hear this sound at my door, and it sounds like somebody's trying to open the door. Click, 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 click. Not forcefully, slowly and gently. I froze, and my heart, it was pounding so fast. But then it stopped. And again, the hallway was empty. I checked the front and the back door. The locks were locked. The deadbolt was locked. There was nothing. I had pretty much at that point convinced myself that it was all in my head until I walked back through and see the kitchen. And there on the table is one photograph, one that I've never seen before. And the scary thing is, it was me sleeping in that photograph from inside my home, inside my room. So I jumped up and called the police. Drop a police car in the comments if you're ready for part 2.
I had a patient that I was working with that kept warning me. I was a nurse's aide at a hospital, and I feel like for me the hardest part of the job was working with patients who had dementia or got confused very easily. Now, obviously, it was due to them having an illness, and so you do feel bad for them. You could always tell when somebody was confused because they would get lost a lot, they would repeat questions, or you could tell that they were scared because they didn't understand what was happening. I think that was the saddest part. There's one specific patient that I don't think I will ever forget. He was an older man, and his name was Robert. And he had like a severe infection, and the doctors told us that this severe infection has gotten to his brain, and he'll go like in and out of consciousness. So some moments he was perfectly normal. He would even tell jokes. He'd ask about my family a lot. He would talk about his life. And then others, he would become completely terrified. Like, for example, one night I was putting him down for bed, I was getting him ready, and he grabbed my wrist. He looked directly in my eyes and he said, "Don't let them move me after midnight." And so I was just trying to reassure him. I said, "Don't worry, Robert, like, you're gonna stay here all night." And then he squeezed my hand tighter and he's like, "You don't understand, they moved me last time." And I was like, "What do you mean they moved you?" And he said, "They moved the ones that aren't getting better." It definitely made me feel uneasy at the time, but I just chalked it up to his mental illness. A couple nights later, it was around 1 a.m., and I was assigned to his room, and I noticed that his call light was on, so I went into his room and I walked in, and he was sitting straight up in his bed, and he had this empty chair next to him, and he told me, "You're late." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean I'm late?" He pointed to the chair next to him, and he said, "I told her that you would come back." And when I looked at the chair, nobody was in it, obviously. I gently asked him who he was talking about, and he started crying, and he said, "The woman keeps asking me when you're going to be leaving." After I left his room, I went and I checked his charts to see if anybody had visited him recently, and nobody had. That next morning, the doctors actually told me that his condition has gotten worse and they're going to move him to another room for more intensive care. I went to go say goodbye to him, and he was very, very calm, and he grabbed my hand and he said, "You're going to stop coming here soon." And I said, "How do you know that?" And he said, "Because you're not supposed to see what happens next." After that, I just kind of told him that I hope he feels better soon, and then I went along with my shifts. And 2 weeks later, I did find out that he did pass away from his condition. But the strange part about that is the nurse that took over my shifts in the new intensive care unit, she told me something that was strange. I guess Robert asked about me every single night, and when the nurse asked me why he cares so much for me, he said it's because I was the only one who listened to him when he would tell the truth. To this day, I don't know if Robert was losing his mind or if he was the only person in the hospital who knew things that the rest of us did not.
Next up in our tour of the United States to find the most haunted location in each state is Delaware. And Google named Fort Delaware on Peapatch Island to be the most haunted location in the entire state. And let's see why. Fort Delaware on Peapatch Island is in the middle of the Delaware River. Fort Delaware was built in the 19th century to protect the ports of Wilmington and Philadelphia. It served as a prison camp for Confederate prisoners of war during the Civil War. Almost 13,000 prisoners were held at one time, and around 33,000 were kept there over the entire course of the war. Conditions were rough, as I think you could assume of the Civil War and a prison camp, and at least 2,500 men died at the fort. Many of them are now buried at Finn's Point National Cemetery just across the river in New Jersey. The fort was abandoned toward the end of World War II and became a state park in 1951. There are many hauntings, as you can imagine, this location. There's the Blue Man that's photographed by several visitors. There's spirits of children that supposedly haunt the officer quarters, and the fort just plays a role in so many horrific ghost stories, as, again, we're not surprised by this. But also not surprising are the dungeons are said to be the most haunted location in the entire place, which is where the prisoners were kept, hence dungeons. The dungeons had no beds and no water, so the prisoners had to sleep on the floor, couldn't bathe, and were just living in their own waste, along with the rats of the dungeon. So the dungeons are said to house full-body apparitions and shadows, as well as disembodied voices echoing through the dark halls of the fort. Again, if there's going to be a haunting, it's going to be in the dungeons. But There are claims that visitors have had their jackets pulled hard enough that they are pulled backwards. And actually, in one instance of this happening, it happened to a ghost hunter, which was then caught on film. So that can be found online. You want to search that. But chains can be heard rattling. Shadows can also be seen darting across the corridors and different rooms. Another one of the most haunted areas is the kitchen, where there is a very cold area in one section of the kitchen that is always said to be that same temperature. It is said to be the spirit of a slave woman who served as a cook for the fort. The staff who work at the fort also tell stories of kitchen utensils and other things within that area being moved around mysteriously. The mess hall is also said to be haunted, and in the mess hall there's an officer portrait, which is said that if you stare at it long enough, it will change from the officer to the officer's skeleton, which I could feel like we easily can debunk this as just a fun optical illusion for kids to where they're not so scared, but they're still like thrilled. But that's just my opinion. I've not been there. That's just my wild guess on that one. It is rumored that throughout the parade grounds, Confederate spirits roam, still trying to escape from the fort. There is one particular spirit that is the most notorious, and it is a story of a 9-year-old Confederate drummer boy. Legend has it that he tried to fake his own death in order to get out of the fort, to be transported back across the river in a coffin. Waiting for him on the other side of the river were sympathetic Union troops or fellow inmates who were supposed to free him from the coffin. But unfortunately, a shift change swapped personnel. Instead of being freed, the 9-year-old boy was buried alive. There was also a general named James Archer. He's a spirit of a bearded man dressed in a gray uniform and is often seen moving around the powder magazine and dungeon area. Again, the dungeons. Why? We're not surprised by this. He was taken prisoner and arrived at Fort Delaware very sick. He was thrown into the dungeon area as punishment for organizing a prisoner uprising. Archer died a few months later from the effects of his illness and his imprisonment after being freed in a prisoner exchange, which is so sad. Like, he got free just to die anyway. Mainly because of the horrid conditions, I'm sure just made his illness so much worse. Some of the great stone staircases are said to have spirits that touch your arms and back and make noises, including footsteps and yelling. So let me know, have you been to Fort Delaware? If you have, what do you think? Historically, I think it would be such a significant building to visit just to learn, because it does have a lot of context that I think is very interesting, morbid but interesting. But as far as hauntings, I would love to hear any experiences you've had or you've heard of.
When I tell you guys that they've been using our energy to power this universe, to power this reality, this prison planet, I'm not lying. This machine right there apparently has been running for 17 years. And then you can tell me, for the past decade or so, when was our life actually felt any type of normal at all? Like, it's been feeling like hell, especially after COVID. You know, like, everyone been having some type of like suffering and issues and confusion, especially with our days. I'm talking about time. Time has been feeling like we've been trying to catch it, like we're chasing it, we're running after it. Days that have been so short, you know, in the past decade, that like we can't even accomplish anything. You know, everything seems to be so far away. Our energy, you know, felt like it was being used so much. If it's not this issue, it's that issue that we have to deal with. COVID, you know, we got earthquake in different places, you got hurricane in different places, people losing lives, you know, left and right. Diseases has been pretty much, taking away, you know, our friends and families and humanity overall. And animals don't behave the same. The weather doesn't behave the same. It's been like that for the past 17 years. And since this machine has been
So listen to me.
shut off, y'all, you can feel the difference. Please, you can tell me. You can feel it. Me personally, I feel like my days are the longest. Like I actually wake up in the morning, I feel the morning, I go through the afternoon, I go through the evening time, and then it's time to go to sleep. Even sleep feels so much better now. Different, far different than what it was like before that machine actually got shut down. You remember your dreams now. Like, you know, like you actually live in it. And that's how it's supposed to be. Your dream's supposed to be a different type of reality that you revisiting. But for a decade or so, we did not like feel that. Like when we sleep, it's just like a snap and you wake up. It's the next day, the next issue you have to attack. So it comes to prove, you know, that like this machine was literally draining us to, you know, I don't know, like to open some kind of portal. And maybe scientists trying to, you know, like use as much as energy that Earth can possibly use to pretty much move it to a different, you know, reality, different dimension, or maybe trying to save the Earth overall. I don't know what kind of practice that they're doing with this machine, but all I know is it needs our energy to run. And then as soon as that machine is shut down, all of a sudden, it's kind of like all the pieces that we've been missing is coming back to us. That is crazy.
As a medium, I get this question a lot. How do I perceive ghosts? And here's the thing. They can appear in different ways to me depending on how much energy they want to spend and how they want to be perceived in my eyes. Sometimes they're manifested like a person sitting just in front of you. Sometimes they give you visions in your mind of what they look like, what their story is, and even flashbacks of their lives. Other times they stand and it almost looks like they have a filter on them. They don't necessarily always look transparent, but you could just tell something is off. Almost like if I had my camera and I had a filter on and I'm scanning. So everything else around it looks normal, but they look slightly different. Slightly distorted or just a little bit out of place. That's how I can usually tell a spirit as opposed to somebody standing there. And lastly, some spirits only like to be heard. So sometimes I'll only hear them and they don't want me to see them. What is so important is that spirits can change how they want you to see them. So if they only want to be a shadow or that's all the energy that they have to manifest for you, that's all they're going to show as. And sometimes they do things just to spook you, so kind of distorting themselves from looking like a normal person and maybe adding some creepy features. I really hope this helped, and if you have a crazy ghost story, I would love to hear it below. So to support these kinds of videos, make sure to like, follow, share, and save for later for more spooky videos.